Okay, hello everybody. Hopefully everybody is in the mix and ready to go. Let me start up my stream manager here and we'll get started. Hopefully we have a lot to talk about today. All right, let's go. We are in the DBA office hours, DBADuck office hours, and hopefully everybody is having a great day today. You never know. Sometimes people have bad days or not so good days. But thanks for joining SQL Dev DBA. And let's, I didn't even think, but we could. I don't actually have my PolGab up on this particular OBS scene, so but this is an Ask Me Anything, so the PolGab is in the chat. For all to post questions and ask anything you want about anything. Well, I mean, technology-wise, right? We could do anything about anything, but you never know what we might get. Otherwise, I did have a fun experience the other day with the DBA, or yesterday with the DBA tools 2.0, and found that they did indeed break changes for what they ran in DBA tools for the 2.0. When you execute a statement to invoke DBA query or to write -DBA DB table data, you now get with the default stuff of what you've written before, you now get a couldn't find the server certificate. I think that was the message. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I found it, was doing a demo today and found that it did the same thing for invoke-DBA query. So not so fun there, but that just gives us an opportunity to learn the new way to do that invoke-DBA query. And I tried to find out where it was, but I could not find the instructions really quick, so I had to defer to run that query, but that's okay. I will have to do a blog post or a stream about this DBA tools 2.0 thing. The installer was nice. The breaking change was you couldn't do the install, but I couldn't figure out where, because invoke-DBA query and DBA tools 2.0 did not seem to have that encrypt part in as a parameter. So we'll see how that goes. We have a couple of viewers, so again, open to questions on what you would like to discuss. In light of that, I'm just looking at, we can just do that while I'm waiting. So I'll log into my jump box here and see if we can find out while we're waiting for questions how we get to be able to run this fun little DBA query without having an error. Dev DBA, I think you don't have any questions today, huh? Maybe. Let me go check, make sure we monitor our PolGab, because that'll be important. Question. Do you have any strategies on exception and or error handling? For stored procedures, I generally use tables to log errors, but I'm wondering if you use something like log files in PowerShell side. No, I don't use log files on the PowerShell side. I do use transcripts. So I will create a transcript and use that instead of log files. There are many times when I have a package. There's many packages out there that I use that do actually operate in a log file. I prefer transcripts mostly because transcripts are the organic log file where you see the command, you see in my profile, I have a command number or a history number. You see that, and then you see the time it executed, and you see any errors that flow through. So I get to see the natural flow of the script instead of just logging it as I go. But for the most part, SQL, when there's logs, it's typically a table. So you might have an exception table, or you might have a log table that basically is a log. As you move through this step, you have an add message to log or something, and that stored procedure will log this message plus whatever you pass into it as parameters, message, number, row count, whatever, and then it puts it in the log. But it's usually tables for me inside SQL. All right, and then, and I apologize, I don't have this on the, let's see if it's not letting me do that. Yeah, it doesn't look like it has a hook when you're not showing the PolGab stuff. Let me see if I can add the PolGab stuff here too, because we're here. So we'll do browser. We'll add an existing source, and we'll just do this PolGab here. Whoops, just make it too big maybe, and then we'll drag it down here. So there we go. I think we'll just use that. And now I think it should let me see it. Show question, and there's the question. Appreciate your question. We'll now do this question. So the question about DBA tools in PowerShell to manage instances and databases in a cloud environment such as Azure AWS. Key differences between managing SQL Server to cloud and on premises. So the reality of this one is that there are many ways to manage SQL with DBA tools or PowerShell, and the cloud complicates things a little, but not much, because SQL is SQL. So when I use PowerShell to manage DB instances, I'm using SMO behind the scenes. So SMO has a great ability to use any type of instance because it detects what type it is and appropriately manages the connections. The reality is, for cloud databases in Azure, it's a little easier because Azure has a play with SMO because Microsoft wrote it. So it can detect that it is an Azure instance or an Azure SQL DB, and it will appropriately issue the commands to get the data or to alter the data. For the most part, what I do with managing the SQL servers with DBA tools and PowerShell, whether they're cloud or not, I don't really step out of the realm of something SMO can do. If I do, I build a function that writes the statement myself, like alter blah, blah, blah or something, or create index. But most of the DBA stuff I do with things are managed instance, Azure SQL DB, RDS, and EC2 and VMs. I mean, they're just SQL, right? So I don't really address the EC2s or the Azure VMs just because they are SQL in a VM, just in the cloud. It's not on premises, but it's a full-blown SQL server. RDS, for the most part, as long as you have permissions to do what you need to do as a super user, you don't ever get an SA on an RDS instance. But you get a super admin that will let you do the things you need to do. But SMO deals with that because you're logging in as a SQL login anyway. So it shouldn't change a lot because queries are queries. And the reality is DBA Tools understands a lot of the things based on SMO. So I don't think there's really much of a difference. I mean, I haven't noticed a huge difference myself. Let's see. Question, I missed this, the chat ones. Anything like try catch to use to handle errors and gracefully in PS? Yeah, try catch absolutely. In both in SQL and in PowerShell, try catch is, to me, is the de facto standard. T-SQL has a little bit different syntax and things like that, but the reality is, for me, is that in T-SQL I use try catch, begin try, end try, begin catch, end catch, and then in PowerShell I use try code block, catch code block. I can even use finally code block and do that, but the reality is that try catch is the way you catch errors in SQL and PowerShell. So that is a given. So you can connect an AWS RDMS using SQL Server Management. Yeah, absolutely. SQL is SQL. So Azure has its own flavor of SQL database and Azure Managed Instance and stuff like that. RDS is in Amazon and AWS. They didn't modify the engine. You can't really do that. They put things around it. So they engineered things that were around it, where they took away the ability to do SP-configure. They took away and they manage it by configurations on the back end. So RDS is still SQL. So when you connect to a database, you get T-SQL is T-SQL. So yes, SMO is completely compatible and ready to run against RDS. So you don't have to worry about that. You just don't get all the features because SMO includes the configuration on the server configuration collection, which is the equivalent of SP-configure, and you won't be able to change those because RDS won't let you. So you have to do a thing on the AWS console. But manipulating data, invoke DBA query, getting data from files, it's all there. It's all there. Yeah, try catch in PS in PowerShell is the way it works. Yeah, that used to be trap. Okay, so back in the olden days, because I'm old, they had trap. That's what they had in 2.0, and it was less than stellar. It wasn't awesome, and so they migrated to the try catch because that's what you do in C# with curly braces and stuff like that. So to me, that's what I use for sure. Do I always try catch everything? No. I wish, but no, not really. There are times where it's down and dirty, and if I'm developing something to publish, or if I'm developing something in my own module or library, then yes, I do want to trap that, so I'm friendly to myself instead of having it just blow a red error. I want to make sure that I'm cleaning things up, or if I'm doing things, there's really not a whole lot of things I can do in PowerShell like transactions, but most of the stuff that I'm doing is autonomous in single instance things. Like if I'm changing a page verify, I'm going to change it. But the best thing about SMO is that if one of them blows, then it's an exception on whatever it blew on. So if I'm setting page verify compatibility level and things like that in a database object, and I do alter, it will put all of them in statements to alter them, and whatever one fails, that will be the error message you get back. So all the other ones will succeed. So typically, I'm not doing a whole lot in transactions in DDL. I typically don't do that. I can, though, if I get a catch, I can go alter those back to what they were. So I could do that, but yeah, not so much on everything, just in my published libraries or my stuff I do for DBA tools. Obviously, I do try catch. But PowerShell is completely versed in the .NET-ism of try and catch, which I like. Makes things friendly. Great questions. I like AMA. AMA is great. It got some good questions and some fun things to do. It's really kind of fun. Trying to see where I see the people in the chat. There we go. Okay, great. That's awesome. Who knew that I could see who's in the chat? All right. Any other questions? Anybody played with 2022 yet? I mean, that's a fun little product as we go through our fun little evolutions of upgrading and migrating to new editions of SQL Server or new versions of SQL Server. It's always fun to migrate from standard to enterprise because you get more features and more fun. But going from SQL 2019 or going from 2012 to 2022 is a fun migration as well. But there's a lot of features in 2022 that people really, really like, and they will be a very big help to many for lots of reasons, actually. So hopefully you get the opportunity to play in some 2022 stuff. The IQP stuff, Intelligent Query Processor stuff, is super awesome. If you haven't had a chance to go play, I would suggest you go play with there is a place in, I think that there is an aka.ms. Yes, there is. And Bob Ward is a stud, by the way, and Bob Ward has created a repository of all sorts of stuff related to no, I don't want any more storage, so where do I get out of there? A repository aka.ms/Bob Ward MS. That repository contains a ton of stuff. Let me see what. I don't know why it took me to my stuff. Maybe it's not Bob Ward. There it is. aka.ms/Bob Ward MS. And that link should take you to a huge number of shared presentations and demos and all sorts of stuff that he's done over the years. Red Hat summits, past summits, SQL Saturdays, all sorts of stuff that he has on there and it's all shared freely, so you can go in and download it and do stuff. There's also a repository that is for the SQL 2022 workshop files. If you look, and that's the folder called, that's what the folder is called in presentations. And it has a lot of stuff in it that will let you play with your SQL 2022 stuff. And it's really kind of cool that he lets you have, even with backups of the databases he uses in his Plight. So that he lets anybody have, basically. And let me see if I can post that. I don't know if I can post that. There we go. And this 2022 workshop is super fun. So if you want to play. This is a great repository to get some really cool stuff and all sorts of things that you get for free because he's a stud and he's awesome. He's a good friend of mine. At least I consider him a great friend. He may not consider me a great friend, but I certainly consider him a great friend. And he's always congenial and positive when we're around. So it's super fun to have a inside track on good, fun SQL Server stuff. But hopefully you enjoy that. That's one of the fun things you get when you have Microsoft people who love community, who support communities, and who live in the communities and do lots of fun things. So For me, it's just a great opportunity to have people learn from the best. All right, we have another question. We all talk about running SQL, T-SQL from PS, but what are your preferred ways of running PS from T-SQL? For both dynamic and triggering PS1s with parameters. Yeah, your really only option inside T-SQL is going to be XP command shell. That's where you're going to be able to do that. Is it my favorite option? No, because I typically don't fire off PowerShell from inside T-SQL. But there are reasons to do that, and that may be your orchestration as far as T-SQL going step to step to step. And part of it may be, like you said, using dynamic SQL, and then you pass the parameters to dynamic SQL. You don't get parameterization by default, but you could build a string that XP command shell could execute, and then you're good. But the challenge comes, in my opinion, the challenge comes with the PowerShell.exe and XP command shell is the permissions required on the outside. So if you're an SA, you can certainly do that. But I believe it runs in the context of the SQL Server service account. So if that service account is not privileged, then does it matter? You're going to be able to do something a user can do, but you won't be able to do stuff as admin, stuff like that. So I haven't done a whole lot of it because I don't like the idea of XP command shell. But does it mean it doesn't work? No. it means it works. XP command shell works. But when you have necessity, like is said in the chat, when there's a necessity, it's a great quick tool that you can use. Yeah, you're not missing much. SQL Dev DBA. I don't think you're certainly not missing a whole lot. I know that Sean McCown uses it a lot, and yeah, everything's remote signed. Yeah, it's all good. Just don't run it under bypass or anything brutal like that. That's a terrible idea. Gives you a lot of power that can bring down instances and stuff like that. And then certainly don't use it to stop services and stuff like that. But to use PowerShell in and of itself, it's nice. It does introduce some overhead. Some people prefer to use it in agent instead of XP command shell. But again, doing it down and dirty, XP command shell's at your fingertips. If it's enabled on your instance, then it's a tool you can use. All right. Any other questions as we wind down our half an hour as AMA? I have some faithful followers that come to my AMA every week, which is great. I love you guys. It's super fun to have questions to answer instead of making up content. But yeah, I mean, agent is a great idea, and that's what I try to do, because the reason why I do it in agent is because I can execute it as a different user. I can actually have a proxy account that has proxy to run PowerShell or SQL or command exec, and that way I can control, by virtue of who can modify jobs, I can control which user gets used to execute that out in the operating system. So to me, that's what I do first. I have not yet had a cause to run XP command shell and run PowerShell yet. I maybe I'm not looking hard enough, but agent serves my purpose for things like automation or things that help me not to have it in T-SQL. But certainly if it's an interactive script, I still would argue that PowerShell is the right place to do it, and agent's the right place to kick it off. Scheduled tasks are more challenging than they should be, but that's even an option because I can actually create a scheduled task with a credential actually with PowerShell. There's a scheduled tasks module that lets me add a scheduled task. So now I don't have to open up the GUI and go through all the stupid little blah, dialog boxes. I can actually do a PowerShell script that lets me pass in a credential, and it will use that credential as what runs that Windows Task Manager or Windows Task. And so that's an option as well. And I like that. Yeah, I know. I knew you were going to say execute as, but still, when you execute it, you're not executing it out in the operating system as that user. You're executing as a different user because it's XP command shell. So it doesn't actually impersonate you. Or is in your experience, does that really happen where it impersonates you as the user and executes it? Does it they do that out in the OS? Dev DBA? I don't remember that that's the case. Just a little icon. I know you're supposed to help me with that thing. Yeah. So whatever you have as the user that runs the SQL Server service account, that's who this XP command shell runs as. So regardless of whether you impersonate or do a set user and a revert or execute as now, the new one, it certainly. Oh, I see. Yeah, I've looked. I'm looking up the who it runs as, and it has an XP command shell proxy account that gets done there. I have never ever used that actually. So that's a mileage may vary in your case or anybody's case that listens to this after the fact and reads the chat. But like I said, I don't use it a ton, so I'm probably not the best person to ask of which context user it runs at because you just get a command string. That's all. I mean, that's what gets executed. So if anybody knows, yeah, so that's great. There is a proxy account you can set up. So there's an exec sp underscore xp command shell proxy account that you can set that proxy account that runs XP command shell. So you can set it to your user or another user. And then anybody that runs XP command shell will use that user to go there. I would just say that that's a terrible way to do things in anybody's world. Only because you end up with challenges that if anybody else that's sysadmin runs the XP command shell, it runs as that user. So if you have a service account that you want to use to run PowerShell, then it works great. Oh, yeah, I didn't know it was set to slow mode. Shield mode is on, but I'm not sure. If shield mode stops things from happening, I'll have to turn that off because we want quick mode. We don't want slow mode. So I'll have to look into that. Thanks, DevDBA. We'll get that going. So that ends our AMA, and I appreciate everybody's patience and time that they've taken to be here. Let's see. No more questions showing on PollGab. So we're good. We will reconvene next Tuesday at 4, and we will resume our fun AMA things. Thank you both, and anybody else who's viewed this broadcast. Hopefully everybody got what they wanted out of it. And we will see you next time. Adios.